Welcome to your Science News Update. Today, we're taking a trip from our planned return to the Moon all the way down to the very core of the Earth, and from ancient human history to the future of medicine.
So what have we got on deck? Well, we're going to find out why NASA's big trip back to the Moon is hitting a snag. We'll also dive into a huge study that's flipping what we thought we knew about autism on its head. Plus, there's an incredible secret hiding deep inside our planet, and we'll look at the real reason a legendary civilization may have changed course.
Okay, first up, let's head to space. It seems that humanity's grand return to the Moon and a really key mission to the space station are both hitting a bit of a speed bump right on the launch pad.
So NASA has had to adjust the schedules for two major flights, the Artemis 2 mission, which is set to orbit the Moon, and the Crew 12 mission to the International Space Station. And what's really interesting here is why. You see, they're facing totally different kinds of problems. Artemis has a tricky technical issue, while Crew 12 is just, well, waiting on the weather.
For Artemis, the problem is a persistent one. During a final practice run, a fueling test, they found what they're calling an out-of-limits liquid hydrogen leak. Now, this isn't just some random fluke. That massive SLS rocket has a bit of a history with its hydrogen plumbing, which makes this a really tough challenge for the whole program.
The Crew 12 delay, on the other hand, is much more common. Just plain old bad weather. High winds up where the rocket would be flying forced them to postpone. But this isn't just any routine crew swap. This mission is super important for getting the International Space Station back up to its full team of 7 astronauts after a medical evacuation last month left them a little short-staffed.
All right, from the challenges way up there, let's turn to some amazing new discoveries about our own planet, from the very top of the atmosphere all the way down to its mysterious core.
First up, a big atmospheric puzzle. Back in 2021, scientists saw this record-breaking spike in methane levels in the air. I mean, the increase was just off the charts, but the reason why wasn't what everyone first thought.
It turns out the problem wasn't some sudden massive increase in emissions from human activity. The real reason was a shift in the chemistry of the atmosphere itself, all thanks to these little molecules called hydroxyl radicals. The best way to think of them is like the atmosphere's natural detergent. They're the things that normally clean methane out of the air.
So it was basically a 1-2 punch. First, during the COVID-19 lockdowns, we saw a big drop in air pollution, which, it turns out, is a key ingredient for making that atmospheric detergent. So the atmosphere's cleaning power got weaker, kind of like the drain got clogged. At the exact same time, a long La Nina weather pattern made things wetter around the globe, which meant natural sources, like wetlands, started releasing a little more methane.
It's a fascinating look at how our actions can have unexpected consequences for the atmosphere. But what happens when the planet itself changes around us? Well, a new study is rewriting the history of Rapa Nui. You probably know it as Easter Island. The old story was always that they caused their own collapse, ecocide. But new evidence points to something else entirely. And when you look at the timeline, it's pretty clear. By studying ancient leaf waxes, scientists figured out that a really bad, multi-century drought started right around 1550. We're talking about a massive drop in rainfall, 600 to 800 millimeters less per year. And this huge climate shock lines up perfectly with big cultural shifts, like when they stopped building the famous Moai statues and a new social structure emerged. And finally, for our planet, we're going from its surface to its very center for a discovery that is, frankly, mind-boggling. New lab experiments suggest that there's a gigantic reservoir of hydrogen locked away in the Earth's core, potentially 45 times more hydrogen than in all of the world's oceans combined. So, how in the world did they figure that out? Well, they essentially recreated the conditions of Earth's formation in the lab. They made these little artificial core samples, then squeezed them between 2 diamonds to mimic the insane pressure at the core, and then blasted them with the laser, heating them up to over 4,800 degrees Celsius. And what they found was that under those conditions, hydrogen just gets soaked up by iron, which suggests it was locked away right as our planet was forming. All right, next we're going to shift our focus to human health and our own ancient origins. And hey, if you're finding this stuff as fascinating as I do, hitting that like and subscribe button is the absolute best way to make sure you never miss an update from us.
Okay, let's turn to some breakthroughs that have a direct impact on our health. From a brand new cancer therapy to a study that could totally reshape how we understand a pretty common diagnosis.
So, in big medical news, the FDA just gave the green light to a powerful new weapon for fighting a very tough form of advanced ovarian cancer. The immunotherapy drug Keytruda can now be used with chemotherapy for patients whose cancer has stopped responding to the usual treatments. And the approval is based on some really impressive trial results.
You can see here that patients who got the new Keytruda combo lived for a median of 18.2 months. That's a huge jump compared to the 14 months for those who only got chemo. That extra 4 months is a really big deal for this group of patients.
Next up, a massive study out of Sweden is really challenging one of the most basic ideas about autism. For decades, the rule of thumb has pretty much been that for every one girl who's diagnosed, you'll find 4 boys.
But here's the kicker. By tracking 2.7 million people from when they were born all the way to age 37, researchers found something incredible. That 4-to-1 ratio? It's true in childhood, but the rates start to even out in the teenage years. And by early adulthood, the ratio is almost 1-to-1. This strongly suggests that a systemic bias might be at play, where girls and women are just getting diagnosed much, much later in life.
And for our final story, we are going way, way back in time. Not just a few centuries, but billions of years. Scientists have found a brand new way to get a glimpse into the time before the common ancestor of all life on Earth even existed.
The tool they're using for this time travel is a special set of genes called universal paralogs. You can think of them like genetic fossils. These are genes that made copies of themselves so long ago they were around before the last universal common ancestor. And that means these ancient genetic echoes got passed down to every single branch of life and are still hanging out in almost every living thing today.
So, what are these ancient echoes telling us? Well, so far, every single universal paralog they've found is related to one of just 2 basic jobs, either the machinery that builds proteins or the systems that move things across a cell's outer wall. This is some of the strongest evidence yet that these were 2 of the very first complex things that life figured out how to do. As MIT researcher Greg Fournier puts it, this is just an incredible window into a time that's otherwise completely lost to us. He says these genes are basically the only information we will ever have about what life was like before that common ancestor we can all trace our origins back to.
And that's our science news update for today. We will have another one for you in 24 hours.